Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on SiriusXM's Patriot Channel. David Rauch is the president and CEO of ProTech Building Services, and he's joining us now. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
You bet, Stacy. Thank you.
All right, so you are a housing expert and ProTech Building Services. Before we get started, tell us what that is and what you guys do.
Well, we work with developers throughout the country writing their maintenance manuals, which details for the communities they build how to maintain them. And in Southern California and Nevada, we maintain about 600 or maybe 700 communities. So we do a lot of work.
Wow. Okay, that's extensive. Yeah. So this is an area of your expertise, and you're coming in to chat with us about evictions and foreclosures and rising rent. This is a really dastardly time for Americans with the inflation and then this.
Yep, it sure is. Inflation dropped a little bit, but still at 8.6%. It's really high, and affording rent or to buy a new home is really difficult.
So let's talk about the uptick and how people are handling it. What has the response been for Americans as they see their rent go up? It's all costs are up, but of course your pay increases at work. If you're getting an annual raise, it's not keeping pace with the rate of inflation and increased costs.
Yeah, that's right. What you're left over with is with 9% inflation is a lot less money for to save for a new house, to buy a new house, or a lot less money for rent or groceries. And the eviction crisis is particularly bad. Typically from 2000 to 2018, there were 70 million evictions. It's almost 4 million evictions a year in the U.S. And so when they put the moratoriums on the evictions during COVID, and that was in 2020 and 2021, that caused a lot of pent-up demand by landlords, to get rid of renters that weren't paying. So that's why you're seeing a spike in evictions right now.
So it's not that the wave of evictions is fresh people it's not comprised only of people who are freshly late on their rent. This is people who really skated by for extended periods of time and are finally being removed.
There's a lot of that. And, of course, at the same time you have that, you also have, the inflation and just the rising cost of housing. Just today, U.S. home sales dropped for the 6th straight month, but there's still the average price of a home is $403,800 in the United States. That's the average. In California, it's a lot higher than that.
So with the increase in evictions, you've seen a large number of people who are seeking help. The story that we have over at Click Orlando is covering a group called Coalition for the Homeless of Central Florida. And Allison Krall, who's the president and CEO there, says they've helped 6 families just in 1 week. They have more than 100 families that have contacted them looking for a place to sleep. So this could become a little bit of a crisis.
Yeah, it's a big crisis if you're out on the street and you don't have a home or a family to turn to put you up, and you're living in your car, and you have to run the car just to stay cool if you're in Texas and Florida and the southern states, and so being evicted is a big deal if you're one of those unfortunate people getting evicted.
So causes aside, because some people had money to pay, they were receiving stimulus funds and they spent that money and didn't pay their rent, and now the piper's finally catching up with them. But there are other indicators. Eviction rates in Central Florida are on the rise. In 2022, they've so far seen 10,633 evictions. The number for 2019 was only 5,814. Now, that's quite a jump.
Yep. Yeah, and again, it's that pent-up demand. When you put a moratorium on evictions, you're messing with a market mechanism that's very powerful. And for 2 years of a moratorium, landlords were stuck. There was a federal program that I think did disperse $10 billion to landlords to cover their losses, but it still caused a huge problem. And ultimately, let's let's talk about the real problem with housing in the United States, and it has to do with government regulation. If there were less government regulation of the housing industry, there'd be a lot more homes being built, a lot more apartments being built to rent. But the problem is, take California, for example. It's sort of like the gasoline. Why is the cost of gasoline in California $6, $7 and only $4 in the rest of the country? Well, it's because California imposes extraordinary regulations on the oil and gas industry, such that it's not just the taxes that cost that are that increased cost of gasoline. It's the regulations, summer blend, winter blend, this, that. It's even 10 times worse with housing. In California, in San Jose, you have to earn $330,000 a year in San Jose to afford to buy a home. I mean, it's unbelievable, versus, down in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's only $72,000 a year. So that's the cost of government regulation. And it's the same thing with apartment builders. If you built more apartments, if you built more homes, if government took regulation off the back of home builders, then, it would be the natural supply demand forces coming into play. You'd have a lot more places to rent, a lot more places to buy, and the cost to buy a home wouldn't be $403,800. It'd be a lot less.
Yeah. So the comparisons you just did there are so stark. So if you're a young person, there's a possibility of getting a household income of over $70,000 and affording a home in North Carolina. You don't feel like it's as likely that you will earn enough to make that $330,000 to buy a home. And also, when we say a home, yes, it's a home, but in California, that $330,000, the house you can buy with that is probably half or even a quarter of the size of the house in Charlotte, North Carolina, that you only need to earn $76,000 to purchase. So it's like light years of difference, right?
Yep. And look at the housing crisis in California. If you drive along the freeways in California, you'll see tents lining the freeways. Why are so many people homeless in California? Why does California have the highest poverty rate in the nation? It's because the over-regulation of housing. Developers can't build enough houses in California. It takes, I think, what was it? It was 974 days in California to just get the permit. That's almost 3 years to get a building permit. And not only that, once you get the permit, there's this thing called CEQA, C-E-Q-A, California Environmental Quality Act, which any neighbor to that lot that's being developed can bring a lawsuit. I mean, it's very easy, and these lawsuits are everywhere. So it's that litigation, it's that time to get permits. There's so many problems with housing in California. It's unbelievable, and that's why there's so many homeless. And that's why it costs, the average price of a home in California is $1.5 million. It's crazy. But again, I'm only making that point because it's the regulation that is causing this market imbalance. And the same thing that's happening to home purchasing is happening to rentals.
So for people who are, if you have a home that you're not looking to sell, if you're not in the market to buy, this conversation it's kind of it's like a 30,000-foot thing because you're not in the market. But there are a lot of Americans who are finding themselves in the market due to job loss or job instability.
Right.
And so you're suddenly thrown into it, not because you wanted to go house hunting, but you're now placed in that position because you need to find a new home, because you need to find a new job. And in the story here, they talk about, people living in their cars and how once you're homeless and your car is your address, you can't get a job because no one wants to hire you if you don't have an address. There has to be some way around that.
Well, it's I'm not well versed in that. I haven't lived on the street in my life. I don't know what that's like. I can only imagine how horrible it is. I haven't really had to live out of my car. So, geez, it's just a horrible thing. And again, I think the ultimate solution is building more housing of all types. As a matter of fact, the most affordable housing, if you think about it, isn't really single-family homes. It's condominiums. And if we built more condominiums, there was a tremendous amount of supply, the cost would come down and less people would be living in their cars or, you know, out on the street or with family with more condominiums. So it's really, again, I hate to keep bringing it back to this over-regulation, but you know, having been involved in the building industry and the homeowner association industry for 40 years now, it's so stark, that over-regulation, and ultimately it hurts the least among us that can least afford housing.
Yeah, and so, you know, when you talk about the most affordable housing being condos, that is true, but huge blocks of condos actually decrease the quality of life for the neighboring areas unless those condos are kind of built off by themselves and then the amenities come around them. So, you know, just inserting huge condo blocks is actually, it's something that suburban homeowners don't want to see coming their way. So there has to be a balance in the conversation. I feel like we need to have more building, and certainly in California they should just obliterate all of those regulations because there's so much space in California that's available that could be built on if not for the environmentalists. But in the rest of the country, we really have to be smarter about where we place these new developments so that we can respect the people who are already there while building new accommodation for people who are there literally. It's their car, or we build new places. We need to do that. And a mix. I think we should have townhomes, we should have condos, we should have the villas, we should have single-family homes so people can choose based on what they can afford and what they want and what makes sense at their stage of life. It's such it's a difficult story, and certainly a lot of people have zero understanding of just how deadly these regulations are, and you've really helped to highlight that for us.
Yep. And talking about zoning, that's complicated, but, you know, putting condominiums near where other condominiums are, you know, that's the smart thing to do, putting single-family communities where other single-family communities are. But there's one interesting test case that you might want to follow, and that's Houston. Houston is a city of 3 million people. It has no zoning. It's a very interesting situation with how they cite you know, their neighborhoods, and that city's growing like crazy. But you're absolutely right. We have to pay more attention to people that really can't afford housing, and ultimately, you know, the solution I believe in is less regulation and just turn loose the building industry. The free market could build all the housing we needed if it wasn't throttled back by government.
Well, I got to tell you, Houston is in Texas, and Texas is still the Wild Wild West. They do things differently there. We love them and respect them, and we would love to be like them. So it's a great place to look. We'll definitely check out that. That is an interesting thing that they don't have zoning. I mean, that almost sounds impossible. That sounds like that can't possibly be true. But we'll definitely check it out. Great to chat with you. I'm so glad you could join us tonight. David Rauch, President and CEO of ProTech Building Services. Thank you for the work that you do, and thanks for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you, Stacy. Appreciate it.